Hello, fellow book lovers, both readers and writers. I am Maddie Dalrymple. I write the Ann Kinnear suspense novels and suspense shorts and Lizzie Ballard thrillers. And I also write, speak, and consult on the writing craft and the publishing voyage as the indie author. And I share what I learn on the Indie Author podcast. And you can find out more about me and my work at maddiedalrymple.com and at theindyauthor.com. And this is my video series, What I Learned, where I ask authors 2 questions related to their latest book. What did they learn from the book that they'd like to share with their fellow authors? And what did they learn from their latest book that they'd like to share with their fellow readers? And I am here today with Troy Lambert. Hey, Troy, how are you doing?
Fantastic. How about you?
I'm doing great, thank you. To give our viewers a little bit of background on you, Troy Lambert is a freelance writer, author, and editor. He has written over 30 novels and several works of nonfiction, and he lives, works, and plays in the mountains of Idaho with his wife and 2 very talented dogs. And his latest book, Terminated in Topeka, just launched. And so today I'm asking Troy the 2 What I Learned questions about Terminated in Topeka. And we're going to start out with, what did you learn from Terminated in Topeka that you'd like to share with your fellow authors?
Well, first of all, to share with fellow authors, I would say, so I'm a researcher by nature. And so this book actually came about. It's in a series, and in each series, there's a different method of murder. And my research for this one started accidentally on a Twitter thread that a chemist did about strychnine. And it was, first of all, it was absolutely fascinating, just different things about strychnine. There's still no antidote and all this other stuff. So the research for that was fantastic. But what was cool about it was there's a history behind that as well, and a history of different ways that strychnine's been used. And I was able to research that and incorporated tiny bits of that into the book. Obviously, I didn't want to, you don't want to dump all your research into the book, as much as I'm sure readers would be delighted to know every detail about strychnine. They actually probably wouldn't, but
You never know.
you never know. But there's
Depends on the reader, right?
right, it depends on the reader. I mean, there's actually some true crime elements in the history that people might find fascinating, and those things will go on my blog somewhere or something like that if people want to read more. And you can use that as an author. Obviously, you can use your research for other things, for like finding those things. But I would say just seize on those little nuggets of research if it gives you an idea, and dive deep into those things. And don't be afraid to dive really deep. You never know what you're going to find that can actually change the shape of the way your story happens. So for me, that's what happened. I had a certain, like, a poisoning was in mind, but I didn't have that solidified idea until I did that research.
Is there some kind of flag that you use that says, how much is too much? Am I going overboard on detail that maybe the reader won't be interested in?
Yeah, I kind of have like that 10% rule, like the tip of the iceberg type thing. And if it starts to get into a page of exposition about something, then I'm like, it's something you can sprinkle throughout the book. But if you get into a page or 2 of exposition where you're telling the reader all about this thing, you're probably going overboard. I mean, really more than a couple paragraphs and your reader is lost. You don't want to take them out of the story. You want to incorporate that research into a part of this, being a part of the story. So I think that's probably you kind of get a feel for it over time, but the red flag is if you feel like you're preaching a little bit and sharing a little too much of the research, then you've gone too far.
Are you able to share any of how your research influenced the plot of the story without giving away too many spoilers?
Uh,
It's
um,
okay to say, no, you can't.
yes, slightly, because basically, so the idea was a poison, but I hadn't thought of, first of all, where you can get strychnine, like how relatively easy it is to get, and then the effect that it actually had on the human body. Like, I didn't understand all of that until I did that research. So I was able to write a very realistic death scene, and that's all I'm going to say about that without spoiling it. But I was able to write a really realistic death scene and a poisoning further on in the book as well, just because I had that information that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So it allowed me to add a layer of detail and genuine detail that I probably wouldn't have known otherwise.
Did you read, I think her name is Catherine Harkup, and she wrote a book called A is for Arsenic, The Poisons of Agatha Christie, which is pretty fun. Did you reference that at all
I
when you
have
were writing
read
your
that
book?
book. I did not reference it I referenced it for other books. I did not reference it for this particular one. because the way this chemist wrote his own research and the way it started, I dove deep into his sources and his resources on that end of things, which was really, really deeper than I needed to go. I mean, I know the chemistry of strychnine and like all the different, and way beyond what I really needed to know. But because I'm a researcher by nature and kind of a nerd, I just followed it anyway. But that book reference is a really good reference for poisons because Agatha Christie did an awesome job of being very realistic in her depiction of how poisons impact people, how they affect people in the human body and things like that.
Yeah, I guess she was a trained pharmacist. I'm not sure that's the correct term, but trained in compounding drugs. So she was writing from a point of expertise.
Yes.
So, anything else that you learned from Terminated in Topeka that you'd like to share with your fellow authors?
As far as authors, I would, yeah, I mean, I would just say follow that research thread and books exactly like the one you just recommended. There's lots of them out there, and it's absolutely fascinating to go to those books and then go beyond. But just be cautious. Use your research like seasoning, like salt. Too much of it, and you're going to ruin your story.
Yeah, too much and it's like strychnine. I also think
Yes,
that kind of book is fun for people who are maybe know the writing in the crime genre, but they're a little blocked for ideas. And sometimes you read through those kinds of things and you're like, oh, that, the description of what happens there triggers all sorts of interesting ideas for how a murderer might use that.
for sure, for sure.
So, what did you learn from Terminated in Topeka that you would like to share with your fellow readers?
Oh man, so this book, my latest few books, what I'm really loving about them is what I love about other books, and that is creating a twisty mystery. So this book probably has the hardest twist of any book in this series towards the end. So you're going to think you know what's going to happen, kind of, and you're going to be wrong. And I really love that in a narrative in a book. And so I really love writing that because I love to surprise readers. I love them to come down to the end and go, I am totally shocked because that's what I want to do to you. So, but I love that when I read a book as well. So I'm really enjoying the twists. That's what I'm enjoying reading. That's what I'm enjoying writing too, is that twist, those hard twists of a mystery that in the end they make sense, but when you first, you're like, no way, I didn't see that coming at all. So,
I always wish for my own twistily plotted books that people would get to the end and then go back to the beginning and read through them again so they can see all the care and feeding I did to set up that twist at the end. Are there any favorite
yes.
twists you have in books or movies that our viewers might be familiar with?
Well, there's one, I won't spoil the book, the ending of the book to tell you, but the book is called We Lie Here. I can't remember the name of the author, but it's called We Lie Here. And I just read it not very long ago. And the twist at the end of that was one of those that almost did make me want to go back and reread the book and like see because I could remember where she had dropped certain clues and I'm like, oh, that was really good. It was amazing how she did that. And of course, as a writer and a reader, I'm kind of doing double duty there. I'm going, ooh, that's a cool way to twist things. I could use that. But I'm also, as a reader, I like to, as much as I can, just read books for enjoyment, just for entertainment, and go, okay, that was really, really awesome. So that's one of the ones that I really like. Another one that has a really hard twist is Moonlight Falls by Vincent Zandri. That's another one that has a really hard twist at the end, and you just don't expect it at all. But the clues are all there, and then you go, "Oh man, I should have seen that coming." It's a really masterful. He does a masterful job of doing that.
I just looked up We Lie Here, and the author is Rachel Housel Hall.
Yes, yes, and it's so excellent. Highly, highly recommend that book for so many reasons, but specifically as a twisty mystery at the end. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm going to go get it right after this. The one book I read recently that I almost did that is Big Little Lies by Leanne Moriarty. And that made me want to go back to the beginning, but that's a long book. And I was like, I need to give it a little time. But I have done that with movies, gotten to the end of the movie and just gone back to the beginning of the movie and rewatched it because I wanted to watch it the first time as a viewer. And then I wanted to watch it the second time as an author and see how the screenwriter or the director set that up.
Yeah, I have literally dissected movies. This is something most normal readers don't necessarily do this, but as a writer, like sometimes I'll go back and I'll actually dissect that thing plot by plot and scene by scene so I can see like what did this writer do that I can imitate that's really made this so awesome that I just really love it. Or in some cases, I will go and tear something apart that I didn't really like. I was like, well, that was disappointing. And I go back and look at it to see why was this disappointing and why do I not like this? And it's not always helpful for a reader necessarily to go back and do that, except that you can begin to understand the types of books that you love and why you love them. It's because you go, oh, this author does these things, and that's what I actually really like. And then you can see other authors that are like them, read more of their work, and see if that's kind of the voice and the thing you like to follow.
The what you were talking about with the dissecting things, I'm just going to put in a shameless plug for the Indie Author Podcast episode 164, which was what writers can learn from short fiction with Gabriela Pereira. And one of the things Gabriela recommended about short fiction is it is so short that if you read a suspenseful short story that has that twist, then you can very easily go back and you can not only, one of the things she said is you can see a short story in its entirety in a way that it's much more difficult to see and absorb a novel in its entirety, but you can also go back and you can find those twists, and it's a more condensed, concentrated, and less time-consuming way of going back and seeing how someone did something well or did something poorly, if that's a learning experience for you.
For sure. Absolutely, for sure. Like I've dissected entire television series, but it's not something I recommend that people do necessarily, unless you happen to be a story structure nerd like I am and you really want to. But it's not exactly what you would call your simplest hobby to just go through and do. So
And we've talked a little bit about books and stories with twists. Are there any books, stories, or authors that were especially an inspiration for you when you were writing Terminated in Topeka?
in some ways, the newest Glass Onion, the newest of the Knives Out movies, Glass Onion, was actually kind of an inspiration because I really did like the way that was constructed. There were issues with it, and you can go through and people can point those out. That's fun. But for me, the way he did that so well was an inspiration for me, very inspirational for me. I thought that was extremely well done for the most part, and I thought there was a really couple cool twists in there that I thought were really easy to employ something similar. So for sure. And I had just watched that not long before I plotted out that book, so there was probably some pretty direct impact there.
That's great. Well, you have left us with lots of good things to add to our to be read and to be watched lists. But please let the folks who are listening and viewing know where they can go to find out more about you, all you do, and specifically Terminated in Topeka online.
So you can go to my website, troylambertwrites.com. That's the easiest way to find me and find all of my books. And there's information about Terminated in Topeka there. It'll be coming to print soon. It's out in digital now, and audio will be out sometime this fall, I believe, maybe this summer. We'll see how quickly that process goes.
And are you narrating it yourself, or are you having another person narrate
No,
it?
I have a narrator that has done this entire series so far, but this series is going to be changing. Once you read Terminator in Topeka, you'll know why. And so I'm actually switching narrators to a new narrator, starting with this forward from this book in that series. So,
Great. Well, thank you so much, Troy. This was so interesting.
well, thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Sure. My pleasure.